Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if a picture is really worth 1,000 words? Especially when it comes to learning, this new study dives deep into how kids understand the world through pictures. So imagine these researchers are trying to understand how children learn words, and a lot of the time they use pictures to do it. But they started to wonder, does every child everywhere look at a picture and understand it the same way at the same age? It sounds like a simple question, right? But what if the answer is no? What if how we grow up, what we see around us, changes how we learn from images? This study wanted to find out by comparing kids from two very different places, Kenya and the US. The big idea here is that many early childhood tests, like the ones that help figure out if a child is learning and developing well, use pictures. And when these tests are used all over the world, there is this assumption that kids everywhere understand those pictures in pretty much the same way. But the researchers here questioned that. They thought maybe growing up in a place with lots of pictures, like maybe lots of books or television, could be different from growing up in a place with fewer pictures, and if that is true, then a test that uses pictures might not be fair to everyone. It might make some kids look like they know less than they actually do. So, they designed a cool experiment. They tested kids in Kenya and kids in the US to see how well they could identify objects. But they didn't just show them real objects. They tested them using 4 different ways of showing the same thing: real objects, photographs, cartoons, and simple black and white line drawings. They wanted to see if the format of the image made a difference in how accurately the kids could name the object. In the first part of the study, they worked with over 100 children in Kisumu, Kenya, who were between 3 and 7 years old. These kids typically hear Swahili or Luo and start learning English in school. They took a Swahili vocabulary test where they had to point to the correct item out of 4 options. The tricky part was that these 4 options were presented in different ways. Some trials had real objects, some had photographs, some had cartoons, and some had line drawings. They made sure to test each child with all 4 types of presentation. They chose words that kids usually learn. For each word, they created a set of 4 choices. One was the target word, meaning the item they wanted the child to identify. Then there were distractors, which were other items. Some distractors were similar to the target word, and some were not. They used real objects when showing actual items, and for the picture formats, they used photos, cartoons, and those simple line drawings we talked about. This figure here gives you a great example. You see the word for ball, and then the different ways it could be presented. A real ball, a photo of a ball, a cartoon ball, and a line drawing of a ball. The kids had to pick the right one. They also collected information about the kids' home lives, like how much they interacted with pictures and how many books or toys were around, to see if that played a role. Now, for the results. They used a fancy statistical method called generalized linear mixed effects models, which basically helps them figure out what factors are influencing whether a child gets the answer right or wrong. What they found in the initial planned analysis was that the Kenyan children performed similarly well on object, photograph, and cartoon formats. However, they did perform less accurately on the black and white line drawing format compared to the object format. Think of that p-value here as a fluke-o-meter. A p-value of 0.011 means there is only about a 1.1% chance that this difference in accuracy between objects and line drawings was just a random fluke. So it is pretty likely a real difference, but the good news was they didn't see a big difference between objects and photos or objects and cartoons. Then they did some extra digging called exploratory analyses to look at the errors the kids made. This is super interesting because it tells us more than just right or wrong. They found that when kids made mistakes with objects, they were more likely to choose something that was conceptually similar, like picking a cup when they were supposed to pick a ball. This suggests they might still have some idea of what they're looking for. But when they made mistakes with pictures, especially the line drawings, they were more likely to pick something totally random. This hints that the picture format might have been more confusing. This part of the study showed that the Kenyan children made more near errors, meaning they picked something semantically related to the target when they were shown real objects compared to the picture formats. This is a subtle but important finding. It suggests that while photos and cartoons are okay, the object format might still be the clearest for them, indicating a deeper level of understanding or perhaps less confusion. They also looked at whether how much kids interacted with pictures at home mattered. They used questions like, how often do you look at picture books with your child? But surprisingly, they didn't find a clear link between a child's picture experience at home and their performance on the picture tests in this age group. This is a bit unexpected given some earlier research with younger kids. And it might suggest that by a certain age, or with some formal schooling, the difference in home picture experience might not be as strongly related to performance on these specific tests. Now, to make sure these findings weren't just specific to Kenya, they did a second experiment with kids in the US, specifically in the San Francisco Bay Area. They tested younger children aged 3 and 4, to avoid those ceiling effects, where everyone gets everything right because the task is too easy. These were kids from more well-off backgrounds, attending preschool. The procedure was the same as in Kenya, but the test was in English. And what did they find here? The US kids actually performed pretty similarly across all the formats, objects, photos, cartoons, and line drawings. There wasn't a significant difference in their accuracy between the object format and any of the picture formats, even though there was a slight, not quite statistically significant. Hint that line drawings might be a little harder. Overall, these kids seem to handle all of them pretty well. They also looked at the error patterns for the US kids, and this is where it gets interesting. Unlike the Kenyan children, the US children made similar types of errors across all the formats, whether it was objects or pictures. This suggests that for these younger US children, the different formats didn't seem to cause them to make fundamentally different kinds of mistakes. They were pretty much at the top of their game, or close to it, across the board. So, what is the big takeaway from all of this? The main finding is that for the age groups tested, children in both Kenya and the US performed similarly on vocabulary tests using objects, photographs, and cartoons. This is great news for educators and researchers because it suggests that these types of picture-based assessments are likely valid and reliable in both contexts. However, the Kenyan children showed a slight dip in accuracy with black and white line drawings. This is an important nuance. It means that while photos and cartoons seem to be a safe bet globally, researchers might want to be a bit cautious when using simple line drawings, especially in contexts where children might have less exposure to such images. The exploratory error analysis also adds another layer, hinting that the object format might still offer the clearest understanding for the Kenyan children, as they made fewer random errors. This is where we see the real value of this research. It is not just about saying yes or no to a question, it is about understanding the how and why. The fact that the Kenyan children made more conceptual errors with objects compared to random errors with pictures suggests there might be subtle differences in how they process visual information depending on the format. This is crucial for making sure assessments are truly fair and accurate. The researchers also touch